Alright, good afternoon, everybody. I got into a little trouble, I guess, today on the Facebooks, on the internets there. I posted a comment on Vus Nias, and some folks on Facebook called me out on it, and I'm going to defend it. I'm going to defend my statement. There was a horrible story that came out of Israel. As all of these stories are absolutely horrible, where these men are ma'again, they're just evil men who are abusing religion. And he left his wife, what we call in the modern parlance, an aguna. I know some people question that idea of the aguna and say that an aguna is only somebody who, their husband is a POW missing in action. You don't know if he's living or dead, and that's what's called an aguna. And otherwise, this is not called an aguna. I'll be open-minded enough to say that it could be a case-by-case basis. There's problems on both sides. It's not always a one-sided issue when it comes to divorce and things like this. But with that being said, it's an absolutely evil thing for a man to deny his wife a get, and just for his own revenge or whatever other reasons could be. And so here's the case where the man is claiming that his wife committed adultery many years ago, and now the daughter, who is the issue of what the husband claims to be the adulterous affair, she's ready to get married. And the father is demanding that the girl gets a paternity test to prove that she is not his offspring, which would, at least in his mind, mean that she is not allowed to get married to her fiancé. And if we follow the basic, simple biblical reading, he would be correct. However, there are other factors involved, and in general, the Bible also tells us that something needs to be, in order for something to be admissible in a court of law, there needs to be two witnesses. And DNA evidence is not clear whether or not in Jewish law there are different opinions as to whether or not DNA evidence is admissible evidence. So it's not that clear, meaning even if the paternity test came up that he's, you're not the father, in the Maury Povich show, it doesn't really mean anything in Jewish law, according to many opinions, although there are bound to be opinions that would see it as admissible, and therefore, or at least in the sense of astringency, which would mean that she would be restricted to who she's allowed to marry as a mamzeres, as what's often translated as a bastard, but it means specifically the offspring of an illicit relationship, whether it's adultery and adult in the technical sense, not in the colloquial sense, meaning in the technical sense, the question of adultery only has to do with the marital status of the adulteress and not the adulterer. Meaning, technically, from a biblical standpoint, a man could have more than one wife, we don't practice that today, and we excommunicate those who practice polygamy in our circles, which apparently this man deserves such an excommunication, because since he didn't, even though civilly he divorced his wife, it would seem, although it's not so clear, but religiously he didn't, so therefore he's still married to his first wife, and apparently he married another woman in addition to that, so he deserves excommunication according to our tradition. And even with those communities that don't have the excommunication, still prohibit such a thing. And in general, those communities that do not excommunicate polygamists take vows of monogamy. Meaning, in the communities that excommunicate polygamists, there's no necessity for a vow. And generally, Jews try to stay away from taking unnecessary vows, and so such a vow is unnecessary. Whereas in the communities that do not excommunicate, polygamists tend to have it that the husband makes a vow of monogamy when he gets married. So a violation of a vow is probably more serious than the excommunication. So either way, it's a pretty serious issue. Unless the vow was released. Now, with that being said, we don't know who this man is. We don't know what community he comes from. We don't know if he's ostensibly presenting himself as a religious person. He's part of the quote-unquote frum community. Obviously, for him, it would be like the Sanzer Rav said, "Viel rishus and weiniger mitzvahs," for someone to do such a thing. So even if I don't care if he wears a Streimel Shabbos, he's not an Er L'Chiyid. He's not doing what he's supposed to do. He's a sinner, and he's doing something extremely evil and unconscionable and inexcusable. And so even if he presents himself as quote unquote frum, if you want to, that's a term that I guess you can use to identify such a person. Again, so what does it mean? Feel rishus. Feel means a lot. Rishus means evil. Weinig means few, and mitzvos means mitzvos, commandments, good deeds. So meaning that certain people, you could call them frum. It means that they have a lot of evil and very little good deeds. And yet we'll still use the word that we use, which frum means someone who's religious. Not everybody. Most people who are religious, who are frum, are good people. But there are a few bad apples in every bunch. However, I made a statement, I wrote, and I stand by it. I'm not a Lubavitcher Chassid. I don't buy into all of this nonsense, which is racist. And it's ironic that it was a Facebook group that claims to be against racism. I mean, I know they don't like Moreno Harav, Victor Miller's Chusig and Leno on that group. They often speak out against him, which to me is unconscionable. Even I grew up not in a frum home, but we were told, you don't talk about the dead, and yet Haltman Bamachri Mois Kedoshim Emor, right? So, Mimanavshach, whatever you disagree, and also it's very foolish and short-sighted and a lack of wisdom, the insults that they make against Rabbi Miller, because he was speaking from his time, and also it's a lack of insight of what it means a gadol bisman hazeh, it doesn't mean he's like Chazal. It doesn't mean he's with Tana or an Amora. And just because Sichas Chon, the Talmidei Chachamim Svichen Limud, just because the regular conversation of Torah scholars requires study, doesn't mean that everything that they say should be taken as a gospel word. But I still have the utmost respect for Rav Avigdor Miller. Even if he said certain things that people find offensive today, you have to understand he was a man of his time. You know, he was born, in 1910, 1915, something like that. It's a different world, you know. And you can't expect to put even values from 1960s on somebody who was already in his 50s in the 1960s. You know, someone from the Archie Bunker generation, you know, even older, I guess, or about that age. You can't expect that, and I don't mean that as an insult. But he was a very wise man, and someone who I respect immensely, even if I might not say every word that he says is some kind of a gospel word, you know. And the truth is, even when it comes to Divrei Chazal, you know, we're bound by Psak Halacha. When it comes to Agadic statements, those are legends, you know. We can interpret them in other ways. There are ways I still believe it's a mitzvah to say the words. I believe you're connecting to God when you read these words. But I don't necessarily believe that everything should be taken at face value the way some people do. Halacha is halacha, and that we have to follow. But Agadic,